Hello, and welcome to our very first Money Mondays here live on YouTube. So, starting today, we are going to be going live on Mondays just like this, usually around 10 a.m. Sometimes it'll probably take me a little extra to get set up and ready to go, but we are going to be going live here on YouTube. So, if you are a YouTube subscriber, this is really the only platform that we're going to be going live on with this information. We know that we can probably stream to different platforms at the same time using Riverside FM, which we use for our podcast, but we are going to be exclusive here into YouTube. Now, a little caveat to that, if you are a member of our private Facebook group, the Business of Apparel, we will be trying to repost that in the live in the group so that our group subscribers and like our really close community can also get access to this information without having to come over to a separate platform. However, we are not going to be putting this on LinkedIn. Like, we might put some quotes out there, we might pull some quotes out of it, but the full video is reserved just for YouTube. And what we're going to be doing every week is kind of taking a different fashion financial topic, something that has to do with costing or money or business inside the fashion and apparel industry. And I'm going to be breaking down for you what I know. And I felt that the best information to get you for this episode number one was exactly what I spent when I started my own small apparel brand. Now, the small apparel brand that I started isn't something that we market a ton. It's something that we've kind of put down over the last year, to be honest. The brand is called RTQ Apparel. For those of you who have been following Unmarked Street for a while now, you know that a lot of my stuff kind of comes from Dr. Seuss's or The Places You'll Go. So Unmarked Street comes from a line that says, "You will come to a place where the streets are not marked." And Unmarked Street was born out of that. On the opposite page, there is a quote about turning right and 3/4. And so we were using that for a little while and ended up abbreviating it to RTQ Apparel. It is a travel apparel line. We only have two of our minimum viable products out on the internet right now. You can go to rtqapparel.com, check them out. They're extremely technical pieces. They are meant for the travel sector. So if you travel a lot, these are basically base layers. It's almost like, think of it almost as like long johns or underwear that you would wear under any of your other travel clothes. They are made with a silver yarn grid built into the fabric from a beautiful, beautiful mill in Italy. Everything is super soft. The fabrics are made by a performance apparel mill, so they do a lot of cycling stuff, a lot of running stuff. They're really into triathlon fabrics. And so the fabrics are really compressive, which helps with blood flow on the plane. You might have heard of like compression socks. So if you're wearing compression socks, it helps to keep blood flow in your legs so they don't swell while you're on an airplane. Similar idea here. So the leggings are compression leggings. They take a moment to get on, but once they're on, they feel like a really big hug. And then the silver yarn grid that is built into the fabric helps to block your body from EMF radiation. So we all know, well, hopefully we're all starting to learn more and more about EMF radiation essentially being everywhere around us, especially like our cell phones and all of our different devices. When you travel, there is a lot more of that because of the radiation from the plane and all of the different devices that they make you go through in security. There are a couple other brands out there that have like silver yarn apparel that is protecting you from EMF radiation. Ours is a little bit more kind of luxury brand because, number one, the fabric that we got is made in Italy, so it is very expensive, and you'll see that when we go ahead and break down some of these costs here. But it is also a very, very high quality, so it is something that's going to be super soft. A lot of the silver yarn garments that we tested and looked at were kind of really scratchy against the skin. We didn't love that. And so we wanted to search for something. Well, okay. When I say we, it's like the royal we, I guess. When I was searching for a fabric, I wanted something that would feel really good against your skin. And so the grid does that. It doesn't make it kind of scratchy. We also wanted to make sure that when you went to the airport wearing this base layer, kind of these long johns, you could get through security. So we were hearing that there were some instances where if you were buying some of these silver yarn, like t-shirts or whatever, you had to wait to get through security until you could put it on, which kind of defeats the purpose of it helping you through security, I think. Because there was too much silver in their apparel and it was actually making things go off and things go crazy in the security situation. So we took our silver yarn percentage down to just 1%. It is extremely effective. The mill who produced this fabric tested out different size grids, different formulations, different ways of making sure that it was going to be really soft, but actually effective. So it still blocks EMF radiation. Think of it as like a Faraday cage. So if you've ever watched the movie with Johnny Depp, Transcendence, there's like a scene in it where he built like a Faraday cage for her when she wanted to go read outside, his wife. And so it was kind of like this silver, like gridded, like metal cage basically that she could sit in and read. And she couldn't get a cell phone signal in there. So she could never be disturbed if she was reading. It's kind of the same thing where that like grid, the way that it works, prevents all of that radiation from getting to your body. So anyway, that was the idea behind my brand. Like I said, we have kind of put it down. The purpose of me developing this brand was so that I could better understand what it looks like to do a startup. I've been working with a lot of different clients here at Unmarked Street who have startups, who have kind of gotten to a place in their process where they're ready to hire some like senior level talent. But I wanted to understand what they had gone through to get to this point. And so to do that, I wanted to kind of put a real world application to it. And in 2022, Unmarked Street had a really, really great year. And so we had enough profits to be able to put into building an apparel line, really small, but really scrappy. And so let's go ahead and walk through a little bit of that right now. I want to share my screen with you so that I can show you some of my spreadsheets. So, all right, let's see. So today, what I'm showing you here, so this is our initial line planning spreadsheet that we use at Unmarked Street with our clients. You can find this spreadsheet if you go to thebusinessofapparel.com. It is in our shop. It is called the initial line planning template. And this is fairly basic, but it will absolutely get you started. And this is where we at Unmarked Street and the Business of Apparel encourage every single brand to start. Like we think that you should be looking at your numbers, looking at your budget first. And I'm going to explain a little bit why here. So when I had dreams about building this travel apparel line and what did I really want to do with it, there were a lot of different products that I had in my head. So there were several different items that I think of as my travel uniform. I have traveled a lot for my job and for work throughout the fashion industry. I go on factory visits a lot, all the time, trade shows, visiting clients now. That's another initiative that we have. So what I wanted to do was essentially bring my travel uniform to life. I know exactly what it is that I'm going to wear when I get on an airplane or when I'm doing a travel day. And so I wanted to put that into a package that anybody could get anytime. And so this was, let's see. And so this was something that I started to put together, right? So there was a pant that I was always wearing. I always wore a legging underneath because I tend to get really cold on airplanes. So I was double layering kind of my bottom situation. Usually when I travel for work, I like to look a little bit nice. And so I was wearing a dress shirt. I like to have like a sweater or a wrap around me, something that kind of almost feels like a blanket while I'm on the plane without needing an actual blanket. I wanted to have like a really uniquely designed bag that was perfect as a carry-on, could kind of keep my laptop, all of my goods, and make sure that everything was separated properly. And then the t-shirt ended up kind of being another layering piece that went under my dress shirt. And I was considering like what it would it look like if I did something full package. So let's say I put all of these items inside the bag and you could buy it at a discount for, one full package. So that was kind of my overarching like this is what I think would be perfect for the initial launch of this brand. So my duty rate, I produce in the United States. So my duty rate ended up being 0%. And duty rate is going to depend on the country that you're importing from and the country that you're importing to. So from and to the US was 0%. And then I started playing with my retail prices, like looking at competitors, looking at other companies that are putting out silver yarn apparel. What could I put out into the world that would compare to it, knowing that my fabrics were quite a bit softer, knowing that you could actually get through security in my apparel, also knowing that it had additional benefits like compression and comfort. And then the way that this spreadsheet kind of works is it will multiply your duty based on like kind of what your cost ends up being. So FOB stands for freight on board. This is like the cost that you get from your factory, or this is your total unit cost. It will add any duty rate. So if there had been a duty percentage in here, it would have multiplied my cost, time that to give me a duty number. Any fees that I would have paid, any insurance that I pay, like for shipping and things like that, I roll it all up to a shipping total, add that to my total cost, and then I get a landed price. So my final price ended up being here in this column O. I'm looking at my margin percentages here. Again, if you've been watching me for a while, you've been listening to a lot of the advice that I've been putting out. I am usually recommending that you have a 65% or higher direct to consumer margin. And so this is kind of where we landed, at least on the green ones. We were looking at a variety of different margins depending on which items we were actually going to bring to life. This number is wrong. Let's update that now. And then what we were also playing with was like, what would it look like to buy each of these items? So you can kind of see here, if I went ahead and added, 100 of each of these, how my total cost goes up and my revenue goes up. But it kind of comes down to this total cost being something that I can afford to do right off the bat. So if I went ahead and put additional units in all of these, you can see my numbers just keep going up and up and up. And at the time, I was not really prepared to be paying close to $50,000. So I zeroed a lot of these out. And we decided to only make the two key products with the silver yarn grid, the t-shirt and the legging. And so this was something then that this is what I was able to afford to do. We rolled all of that up into a certain dollar amount. I'm sorry, that must have actually been a correct number. So there we go. So our total cost, as we were kind of estimating costs. So again, because this is the beginning of your season and you're looking at these numbers really early, you're kind of getting an estimate cost here, but you want to know essentially if this number in line number 11 is something that you can afford to do. Have you been saving money? Is it something that you can stomach? Like if this number ends up in the like $1 million range to order all of your inventory that you want, do you have that much money? And then, yes, of course, our revenue means if we sold everything at full price, what would that make us? And then essentially your revenue minus your cost will give you a profit. And so this would have allowed me to, if we had really gone through like a full sales cycle and really marketed these items to a point where we were selling through them, our profit would have been close to here, selling everything at full price. And what we would have been able to do from there is take that profit, apply it to our next PO, which obviously would have been almost double what our first PO was, increase our revenue, increase our profit, et cetera, et cetera. So as I kind of went through the process, one thing that I also needed to make sure that I was doing was looking at a cost breakdown. And so for each of the different items, I was getting a cut and sew quote from my factory. So because I was manufacturing in the US, there aren't a ton of factories that we've run into here in the US, at least not yet, that are doing like full package. A lot of them are doing cut and sew. So they'll give you a price to basically cut your fabric, sew your fabric, and then any overhead that they need to include in that. And so cut and sew was these different prices. You can see our legging was a lot more complicated. It had lots of pockets. So there was a lot more detail that needed to go into the cut and sew of the legging. Our t-shirt was pretty basic. So it was just the fabric that was really special about it. So cut and sew is from our factory. And then we multiplied. So our fabric cost, like you can see here, was very, very expensive. It was almost $30 a yard for that fabric because it was so technical and it is so soft and it is made in Italy. And so we were using about a yard of fabric per item. And so we put that in here as our fabric cost. We provided special thread to our factory. So instead of using the thread that they just have on hand, we bought special thread. It's called fluff thread, and it actually stretches better with your garments. And so sometimes if you need to provide special trims, that's something that you need to be able to send for yourself. And so by doing that, it was about $1.50 per unit of this special thread that we needed to send over. We put heat transfer labels in everything. And so when we broke that down, it was about $1.57 per heat label. And then for our packaging, when we rolled up everything, including like a box, tissue paper, hang tags, like the little safety pins that we use to put the hang tags on, all of that packaging, when we added it all up, came out to $2.88 per piece. And then we rolled that all up to a final price. So this is essentially how we got to the final prices here in this column N. So these are our unit prices. We add them to all of our shipping fees to get a landed price to then calculate out our margin and all of our other numbers. So I just wanted to give you that as kind of a heads up front. These are all things that you can either get from tools that we have on our website, or these are things that we work on with our clients. So if you're interested in having someone come on board and help you with a lot of this, this is what we do day in and day out. So this is a very clear breakdown of exactly what I spent on my first PO. And what I want to kind of do here, sorry, first is explain to you that because I have a really strong development and production background in the apparel industry, I did not need to hire anybody to help me with those portions of the development of my apparel, right? So I made my own tech packs. I did all of my own sourcing research. So I interviewed all of the different factories that were kind of on my list that might be good to produce with. I ran all of my own fittings, updated all of my own tech packs. I communicated with the factory on my own. All of that was free for me because of my background. And that is all something that if you don't have those skills and you need to be hiring someone to bring them on board, I really recommend that you add that to your upfront budget. There are some fashion freelancers out there who you can absolutely afford right off the bat. They offer a very decent rate, sometimes as low as like $50 an hour. And so you can bring them on for however many hours you can afford every week or every month. And they can be doing at least some of the initial work for you, helping you as much as they can within your budget. If you want to bring on like a high level agency, someone like me and my team, you're going to be in the thousands of dollars a month because we do all the work for you while we are coaching you, giving you all of the templates that we have. Essentially, we're taking all of the work off of your plate and we are experts in it. Like we've been doing this for a collective 55 plus years. So it just depends. Like there's kind of like obviously a range like with anything else. And it depends on what kind of support you want to bring into your team that will kind of define what kind of budget you need to set aside for development help. But I wanted to kind of mention that before I go into this, because this is essentially just the like raw costs that it cost me to do the development process with my factory. So development fees, sample yardage, reference samples, things like that, and then actual production costs. So this would be like on top of any hiring that you need to do. This also, because we didn't decide to like move forward with marketing and sales in a way that really made sense, does not include a marketing and sales budget. That would have been something that I would have probably spent quite a bit of money on, bringing on a sales and marketing team to make sure that we were truly starting to make sales. Like if this was my number one thing that I wanted to be an entrepreneur in, and I wanted to have this apparel line be my thing, I would need a marketing and sales team to come on and kind of help me with those kinds of things because that's not my expertise, right? We all need to recognize that we don't know what we don't know, and so that would have been something that I would have wanted a team to help me with. So we're going to go ahead and walk you through everything that we spent on. So back at the end of 2021, we were able to put aside a number that I had basically saved. So this was a portion of the number that I had saved to start my business. So if you're thinking about starting your own business in any way and you're like in corporate or you have a 9-to-5 job, one of the best pieces of advice that I can probably give you right off the bat is to make sure that you are setting money aside for the beginning of your company. Now, we had, I think, about $20,000 saved for starting my company. I used 10 of it to start the apparel line, and I ended up using 10 of it to start Unmarked Street. And that went into like, I wanted to buy an Alvin mannequin. I needed to buy computers and laptops for the company. There were like a lot of various things like that ended up going into the beginning of building my company that we ended up using that funding for. And so this was kind of the beginning of everything, knowing that, we still had $10,000 of the 20 that we had set aside to save, and we were going to be able to use it to kind of go into this project and do this. The next thing that we did in February, I had several interviews by this point with manufacturers. I had met with different people throughout the US. I knew I wanted to produce in the US because I wanted it to be local. And I had also had several meetings with a mill that I knew produced the kind of fabric that I was interested in. So it took me a couple months to get to this point, to do all those interviews, have all those conversations, have all those meetings. And at that point, I was ready to buy some sample yardage. So it cost me $426.91 to buy my sample yardage. And you can kind of see where I started to calculate out like, okay, so this got subtracted from the $10,000 that I saved. So how much money did it remained on hand for me? And you can definitely see there came a point where near the end of 2022, I started to go in the negative. Like I started to actually need to fund additional money into the apparel line to get it kind of up and running and on the website. So anyway, $426 for sample yardage. Now, sample yardage can come in smaller quantities. If you're usually working with a big mill, they're used to something like this, where it's not like you will have minimum orders that you need to make in order to bulk produce your fabrics. So for example, this mill needed me to buy at least 3 rolls of the fabric that I wanted to buy. But sample yardage could come kind of folded. It didn't need to come on a whole roll. They could make a smaller amount for me just so that I could do my development samples. So that's what I was purchasing here. At the same time, I was also purchasing some reference samples for fit and for construction. And this is a great way to start the designs of your brand and to let your factory know exactly what you're looking for. So I bought like a t-shirt that had the exact fit that I wanted. I bought a legging that had the exact fit that I wanted. And then you can see down here a little bit further, I bought another reference sample that had the exact pocketing construction that I wanted. And so by sending all 3 of these samples off to my factory, they could see exactly what I wanted in the way of fit and the way of pocket construction so that they could replicate it for me from like a live physical sample that they could see. And so that was really important for me to make sure that I had those pieces on hand. Now, the prices of these are a little bit high because I bought 2 of each. I wanted to have one for me in my office, and I also wanted to then send one to my factory. In the mix there is also our development costs. So a lot of factories that you're going to work with when you first start out, mostly because you don't have a relationship with them yet, they haven't vetted you. They don't know if you're definitely going to move into production. Will you have the money for that? Will you have the time for that? They will charge you development costs. And so this was my development fee with the factory to develop multiple rounds of samples. I think it was part of the contract. I think it was up to 3 different prototypes and 1 size set. And so these were the development costs that I paid upfront to be able to do that. So I worked with Bohm Studio out of LA. Bo is a great person to work with. He is extremely friendly. He is extremely knowledgeable about the industry. If you're looking for a USA-based production facility that you would like to work with, I always recommend that my clients or people who are in this position to go check out Bohm Studio. So this was my shipment to them. I shipped them all of the samples. That's what it cost me. So again, I'm going down to every single little thing that I spent on this. Like, this is the amount that I spent at FedEx to send a package. I want to include that in here. So additional sample yardage that I then needed, we needed to buy a little bit more because we used all of the other up. So that was an additional $347. In May of 2022, I was able to set aside a little bit more money to save. So we added this kind of to our budget here. And then we were getting to a place where we had approved prototypes. We were really happy with how everything was fitting and looking, and we were ready to buy bulk yardage. So this is when I reached back out to my mill and said, okay, now I'm ready to buy those minimum rolls that you need me to buy. There was a split. Basically, I think it was like 30% upfront, and then the remainder ended up being due several months later, I think, after shipment. So this was my upfront payment for bulk yardage, basically my deposit to say, yes, I'm buying this. And then I started to get into my trims. Like, how was I going to be packaging this? How was I going to be labeling my garments? And so I reached out to a company called Cruise Labels. They are also in LA, and I wanted to do a test with them. So I sent them some swatches of fabric. We tested the heat transfers to make sure that it would adhere, and so that they could give our factory heat settings and time settings. So when you do a heat transfer, there's a certain machine that you use, and you need to be able to set it at a certain temperature to get the right amount of heat. And you also then need to hold it down and press it for a certain amount of time. And so by those heat transfer companies helping to test that for you, you will be able to know exactly those 2 settings that you can then send to your factory so that when they're producing your goods, they use the right settings. So this was the cost for the test. And then we started to get into additional shipping fees. What were things costing to ship to me, like first proto samples, and then I was shipping them back so that they could see exactly what I'd written on the garments or marked on the garments or pinned on the garments. I saved a little bit more in June. We had another good June. And then I actually purchased those heat transfers. The tests went well. We got all of our settings and our parameters. I went ahead and purchased a number of those heat transfers. Again, shipping samples to me, this was the remainder of my bulk yardage once it finally shipped was $6,300. Fabric shipping fees. So we were shipping and importing in from Italy. And so there was a UPS shipping fee. And then there was also a customs fee. So to bring in basically anything from a different country, there will be a customs fee and a kind of a duty fee on top of that. So our shipping fees, like for UPS, it was $765 at the time. And our customs fee was $1,400. I put down a deposit for production then at that point with Bohm Studio. And so this was a portion of production, most of it, it looks like. And then there was an addition for additional protos because I wanted to do all the way up to 6X sizing. And so I wanted to receive 2 4X protos so that I could make sure that my grading was actually working out really well in those plus sizes. So I paid additional money to make sure that those were fitting properly and I had my grade correct before I moved forward with producing those additional sizes. I purchased hang tags, I purchased boxes, I purchased stickers and tissue paper and label printer paper. So if you're like shipping your own stuff, I was planning on shipping all of my own boxes, all of my own goods. And so I needed to have labels that I could actually print, like shipping labels from my house. And so there was paper that I needed to be able to get for that. And then the final production shipment payment, and then shipping fee to Santa Cruz. So I was in Santa Cruz at the time. So you can see I ended up being about $12,500 over what I had specifically saved to be able to do this. And my total spending ended up being about $25,000. Now, I only purchased, so this is what I ordered. I ordered 500 units total. So it was like 250 t-shirts and 250 leggings. I ended up receiving more. So because of that, I ended up having to pay more. And so that was where like some of these additional fees ended up coming in. And so that's why some of these are a little bit higher than I had anticipated, but that does happen sometimes. And so we ended up accepting these. Essentially what happened is Bohm Studio kind of came back to us and said, we have additional fabric on hand. There's fabric left on your rolls. Do you want us to use it and make additional units, or do you want us to hold on to your fabric for an additional purchase order? And me, knowing that I wasn't really going to be moving forward with marketing and sales in a way that was going to be very robust, I knew that it was probably going to take me a very long time to either sell any units, sell through units, or even if I was going to like kind of take this to the next level, or was I going to be using these pieces as like giveaways or gifts or something like that as we kind of move into additional phases of our business. So that was what I decided to go ahead and produce the additional goods instead of having them keep fabric on hand for me. And then we received everything. I organized everything. So we have our inventory sitting in a closet. We do fulfill orders if and when they come in. I mean, the website is up and running and it is like a totally legit good product. We just there's not a lot of people who know about us because we haven't put the effort into market and sell. And so that's another section of your budget that I want you to consider. Now, if you are starting an apparel brand and you want to be making more than just a few hundred units in your first run and you think that you can sell a lot more, you've got maybe a huge community and you know that they're all going to want to buy from you right away and you need to order a lot more. So if you're adding development fees, let's say you're going to hire one junior developer full-time, and that's going to cost you $80,000 a year to hire her or him full-time. Let's say you're giving them a really low salary. Like, I don't recommend this, but let's say $80,000 includes benefits for them and maybe a 401k match. That is a really, really low salary for someone to come in and do all of that work for you. We actually like to say that junior developers should be making about $80,000 a year. Maybe we'll do another session on this here soon. If you want to be bringing in, sorry, $80,000 a year salary and then add benefits and your 401k match. If you want to be hiring someone who is an expert in these areas and like is someone who has a lot of experience in the industry, can take a lot of the work right off your plate and just do it for you, expect to be paying quite a bit more. You're going to want to be making yourself known on all of your social media platforms. If you need help with marketing, if you need help with sales, you're going to need a website that you can sell from. Especially if you want to be doing direct to consumer and you don't have a retail shop. We in the industry, so a lot of us like luxury high end agencies who are out there helping clients. When we're talking to small startup brands and they're kind of asking that question, how much do you recommend that I save before I start my brand? There's a lot that goes into that question, but we typically recommend that if you need help in the way of development, in the way of marketing, in the way of sales, and then planning your first inventory purchase, we actually recommend that you're saving around $150,000. For me to have spent $25,000 not spent on development, marketing, or sales, and knowing that this was kind of just a test so that I could better understand my clients, this was truly like a minimum. This was probably the lowest amount that you could get away with. Um, and I learned a ton through this process. There is so much that I can now help my clients with better because I understand this process. I know what it takes to act like a startup and be in their shoes, but this was truly a minimum. So if you're already an expert in development or you feel like you can do all of that work yourself and you're really good in sales and marketing and you also want to handle all of that yourself, number one, be gracious with yourself because it's going to be a ton of work on your plate and there are going to be some really long hours, some really long days. So be kind to yourself if you're going to be taking all of that on your own. There are people who do it. We hear about solo entrepreneurs doing the whole shebang all the time. I just don't want you to burn yourself out because there is going to be so much more to do even after you launch your brand. So consider that. $25,000 is minimums. You would really start super small, probably again with one or two minimum viable products. What are the products you want to be known for? What do you want to be famous for? What do you want everyone to come to you to buy? So those would be your first couple of items to start. You want to buy as low units as you can if you really want to keep your costs down. And then you want to be, like I said, trying to do a lot of it all on your own. So think about that. If you have any questions on any of this, I know I went through a lot today of how I kind of started my own brand and how I kicked all of that off. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. Please feel free to put comments below. Like I said, we will be back next Monday with a new financial topic from the fashion industry. I hope this was helpful to you in some way. If you would like to see a better breakdown of like what $150,000 savings would get to you or what $150,000 investment or a loan would get you, we can maybe do that in another episode too. So let me know what you're interested in. We would love to cover topics that you want to know about. That is definitely something that we can look into. And thank you so much for joining me in the replay. If you're here with the replay today, please put hashtag replay below. We'd love to hear from you. And yeah, I will see you next week. Have a great rest of your Monday.